The chamber was larger than any human building could ever be. Light flowed through the walls in soft, golden waves that shifted with every movement, as if the room itself was alive. Cale had never felt smaller, nor more aware of how fragile his own species seemed. Standing at the edge of the dais, he could see the Empress before him, not just a ruler, but a being whose presence seemed to bend the air, the gravity, even the light. Her skin shimmered like polished bronze, her eyes deep pools that seemed to pierce through the layers of his mind, and her voice, when she spoke, did not merely echo. It resonated inside him, vibrating somewhere between thought and soul. He swallowed hard. Years of training and experience as a diplomat, as a soldier, and as a scholar of alien cultures could not have prepared him for this moment. He had faced hostile fleets, negotiated peace in dangerous worlds, and survived battles where death hovered like a predator. But nothing had ever felt like standing before her. Her reputation preceded her, whispered in the stars. The alien Empress, ruler of the Azari, unyielding, wise, and feared even among her own kind. Cale's heart thudded painfully in his chest, betraying him in a way he could not control. Yet what terrified him more than her power was the thought of her daughter. Ever since he had first seen her in a small, crowded conference room on a neutral station, Cale had felt something unfamiliar, something dangerous. A pull he could not rationalize. The Empress' daughter, Lyra, had laughed at one of his clumsy attempts at diplomacy, and that laugh, bright, unguarded, human in its warmth, had lodged itself in his memory like a star caught in the sky. He had tried to hide it, to bury it under professionalism and duty, but every encounter, every meeting, seemed to remind him how deeply he cared. Now, standing before Lyra's mother, Cale knew that secret was a vulnerability, and the Empress had to sense it. "Cale Thorne," she said, her voice curling around his name like a living thing. "You have come far from your world. Many of your kind would have turned back long before reaching me." She tilted her head, and Cale felt the weight of centuries in her gaze. "Tell me, what drives a human to walk willingly into the lion's den of another species' throne room?" Cale straightened, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "Respect," he said, "and hope that understanding can exist even where fear is strong." The Empress smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. It was not warm, it never would be, but there was recognition there, a knowing glimmer that set Cale's nerves on fire. Recognition of something he had tried desperately to hide. She leaned forward slightly, her hands resting lightly on the crystalline railing before her. "And yet," she murmured, "I suspect there is more, something personal, something you would not speak aloud even to yourself." Cale's throat tightened. His mind raced, picturing Lyra again, her eyes wide with curiosity during their first meeting, her voice gentle but firm when she disagreed with him, the careless way she let herself move as if she belonged to no protocol at all. He realized, with a shock that left him breathless, that the Empress knew. She knew he loved her daughter. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Not fear of punishment, not fear of death. He had faced those before, but fear of consequences he could not anticipate. The Empress' knowledge was like a blade poised above him, and yet, strangely, it was not threatening. There was a subtle test, a challenge, hidden in the depths of her gaze. Cale felt raw, stripped of pretense, utterly human in a place where humanity was nearly meaningless. I only wish to serve," he said finally, his voice steadier than he felt. "To do what I can to protect peace between our worlds." "Peace," she repeated, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Or love." The word landed like a stone in his chest. It was not a question she asked for politeness. It was an inquiry that demanded honesty, demanded a revelation he had hidden for so long. Cale's lips parted, but no words came. He realized the enormity of what he had walked into. One wrong syllable, one wrong glance, and everything he cared about could shatter. The Empress leaned back, her posture regaining the unyielding elegance of a sovereign. "We will see, Cale Thorne," she said, "how far a human will go when driven not only by duty, but by what they cannot hide. Remember this, every action you take from this moment will echo in ways you do not yet understand." Cale bowed deeply, his heart pounding. He had entered the chamber seeking diplomacy, but now he understood that this meeting was more than politics. It was a reckoning. And as he left the dais, each step echoing in the vast hall, he felt the first real stirrings of hope and dread, entwined in a single, unbreakable thread. The Empress knew, and somehow that knowledge had changed everything. Kale walked slowly through the grand corridors of the Empress Palace, his boots echoing softly on the polished floor. The walls were alive with faintly glowing patterns, shifting like currents in a river, and he felt their subtle pulse in his chest. Each step reminded him that he was far from home, far from the dusty streets of Earth, and that the stakes were far higher than any negotiation he had ever faced. Every detail of this place, from the soundless servants who glided beside him to the faint scent of alien blooms that clung to the air, made him feel like a small creature in a world of giants. He remembered the Empress' words, the cold precision of her question, peace or love. It replayed in his mind, forcing him to examine his own heart in ways he had avoided. He had believed he could hide his feelings for Lyra, thinking them personal, harmless, even foolish. But now he understood that the Empress' intelligence was beyond anything humans could imagine. She had seen through his careful mask, and now he had to confront the consequences of his emotions in a world that did not understand them. Later, Kale was brought to a quiet observation chamber, overlooking a sprawling garden of floating plants and cascading water that defied gravity. Lyra was there, studying the intricate layout with a soft smile, unaware of his arrival. Her hair caught the sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling, glowing like copper threads, and Kale felt his heart tighten. He wanted to speak, to reach out, to warn her of the silent storm he now carried inside him. But the Empress' presence lingered like a shadow, reminding him that every word, every movement was under scrutiny. Lyra turned and smiled when she saw him, a warmth that made his chest ache with longing. "Kale," she said, her voice like a gentle current in the still air. "I didn't expect to see you here so soon." He forced a calm tone. "I was invited. The Empress wanted to speak with me." The words felt awkward, heavy with unspoken truths. He could not tell her that the Empress knew about his heart, that she had already seen what he tried to conceal. That knowledge would change everything between them if it ever slipped into the wrong conversation. Lyra tilted her head, curiosity brightening her features. "And how did that go?" Kale hesitated. There was no way to answer fully without betraying his feelings or alarming her. Instead, he said, "It went well, but there is much I still must learn." He looked out over the garden, pretending to focus on the floating blossoms, but his eyes kept drifting to her. She laughed softly, a sound that reminded him again why his emotions were so dangerous. "You always sound so formal, Kale, even when it's just us." The comment made his pulse jump. I must be careful," he admitted. "Not everything here is like home." Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment he imagined a world where her mother's gaze did not loom over them, where feelings could be expressed without consequence. The thought was intoxicating, and yet impossible. Kale felt the sharp sting of longing and frustration collide inside him. Suddenly, a ripple of energy passed through the garden. The floating plants shivered, and a strange hum filled the air. Kale's instincts screamed that the Empress was near. He looked up and saw her at the edge of the chamber, watching them, serene but commanding, like a storm held in delicate balance. Lyra seemed unaware of her mother's approach, but Kale knew better. The Empress spoke without moving her lips, a voice echoing directly in Kale's mind. "Your heart is known. Do you understand what that means?" Kale felt a chill crawl down his spine. He nodded silently, unable to reply aloud. He had understood from the first moment he met her that power in this galaxy could be subtle, invisible, and absolute. To love Lyra was now not only a personal risk, but a diplomatic one. Every thought, every glance, every hesitation could be a weapon or a weakness. Lyra tilted her head toward Kale, sensing his tension. "Kale, are you okay?" He forced a small, reassuring smile. "Yes, just thinking." But deep inside, Kale knew thinking was no longer enough. The Empress had thrown him into a test far greater than any battlefield he had ever faced. He had to navigate this world carefully, protect the person he loved, and survive scrutiny that pierced the soul. And yet, despite the fear, a spark of defiance flickered within him. He would not turn away. He could not. For Lyra, for humanity, he would face whatever trials awaited, even if it meant standing against the might of an alien Empress herself. The next day, Kale found himself summoned to the Empress Council chamber, a vast space filled with beings from countless worlds. He was acutely aware that every eye watched him, not just as a diplomat, but as someone who carried secrets too fragile to expose. The Empress sat at the center on a throne that seemed to float above the floor, her presence commanding silence without effort. Cale's mind raced. He knew this was more than a formal meeting. She was testing him, probing for the limits of his resolve. Before any discussion began, she spoke, her voice calm yet sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. Cale Thorne, I have observed your attachment to my daughter. You try to hide it, but your actions reveal what your words deny. The chamber fell utterly silent. Cale's stomach tightened. Every heartbeat felt like it could betray him. He swallowed, searching for a response that would balance honesty and caution. Your Majesty, my intentions toward Lyra are... He paused, unsure how to frame his feelings without dishonoring her or himself. They are personal, yes, but my duty comes first. I would never act against the interests of your people. The Empress' gaze softened for a fraction of a second, just enough to make him notice. Then it hardened again. Loyalty is tested in ways that cannot always be predicted, Cale. I need to see what you are willing to risk. Not for yourself, not for your world, but for the one you care for most. Cale's chest tightened at the weight of her words. The Empress had shifted the battlefield from politics to emotion, from diplomacy to the very heart of his humanity. He realized that love, something he had never thought of as a weapon, was now a tool of survival and proof of character. The session continued with questions about human alliances, strategies, and loyalty. Cale answered each carefully, aware that the Empress watched his every nuance. Yet amid the discussion of fleets and treaties, Cale's mind kept drifting to Lyra. How she had laughed that first time they met, how her eyes always seemed to seek understanding, and how unguarded she could be even in the presence of alien power. Each thought was a spark that reminded him why he could not falter. After hours, the meeting ended, and Cale was escorted to a quiet corridor. The Empress appeared beside him suddenly, moving with a grace that seemed impossible. You survived the council well, she said, but the next test will be more personal. You will meet with Lyra under circumstances you cannot yet predict. Cale felt a surge of both hope and fear. To be near her, to protect her, to perhaps express a fragment of the truth, yet knowing the Empress would see everything, was a risk that made his pulse race. He wanted to plead for normalcy for a moment without scrutiny, but he knew that was impossible here. Later in the private garden, Cale finally encountered Lyra alone. She was seated on a floating bench, staring at a cascade of light-blooming flowers. Her expression was thoughtful, almost distant. When she saw him, her lips curved in a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes fully. Cale, she said softly, your face tells me you've been tested again. He sat beside her, careful not to touch, careful not to let his emotions betray him further. Yes, he admitted, and I learned that some truths cannot stay hidden no matter how we wish. Lyra looked at him closely, curiosity and concern warring in her expression. Do you mean about us? Cale felt the weight of her words. He wanted to tell her everything, to throw caution aside, but the Empress' presence lingered like an invisible thread between them. Instead, he whispered, I care for you more than I should, but I will not let that endanger you or your people. Lyra's eyes glistened, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, the floating flowers and the impossible tension between desire and duty. Cale realized then that this was only the beginning. Love, he understood, was not just a feeling. It was a choice, a responsibility, and now a battlefield of its own. The next morning, Cale was summoned again, this time to the Empress' private quarters, a place even fewer beings had entered. The doors opened before him as if they recognized his presence, revealing a room filled with crystalline sculptures that pulsed faintly with light. The air was heavy with quiet power. The Empress stood at the center, her figure framed by the soft glow. Cale felt the familiar mix of awe and fear. She had a way of making him feel both exposed and strangely alive. You have survived observation, she began, her voice calm yet unyielding. But survival is not proof of understanding. You care for my daughter, Cale, and you will be tested on that truth. She moved closer, her eyes studying him like a scholar examining an unknown artifact. I will create a situation where you must choose between duty and the one you love. Only then will I know the depth of your loyalty. Cale's heart raced. He had imagined tests of strategy or diplomacy, but not this, a personal trial orchestrated by the most powerful being he had ever met. "I understand," he said, though his voice felt fragile. "Whatever it takes, I will not fail." The Empress inclined her head, almost imperceptibly approving. "We begin immediately." Cale was led through a labyrinth of corridors to a training arena, where holographic projections of alien ships and planets floated mid-air. Lyra was already there, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of worry. Before he could speak, the Empress' voice echoed through the arena. "A threat approaches. You must act." Suddenly, alarms blared, and a fleet of rogue drones materialized, firing chaotic bursts of light. The simulation was realistic. The projections moved as though alive, and Cale instinctively moved to protect Lyra. He felt his pulse in his ears, every decision weighted by fear for her safety. "Cale, they're just projections," Lyra shouted. Her voice carried a mix of disbelief and caution. "I know," he replied, his eyes scanning the drones. "But I cannot risk a single chance. I won't let anything happen to you." He moved with precise skill, dodging attacks and manipulating the holograms to shield her. Each movement was calculated, but his mind was consumed by the thought of her, by the fact that he would throw himself into danger without hesitation, just to see her safe. Lyra watched him, her admiration and concern tangled in her expression. When the simulation ended, the drones vanished, leaving the arena quiet except for their heavy breathing. Cale turned to her, sweat dripping from his brow, heart still racing. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, voice rough. Lyra nodded, a small smile breaking through. "You're incredible," she said softly. "You didn't hesitate for a moment." Cale felt a mix of pride and vulnerability. She didn't fully know the depth of his feelings, yet she had seen enough to understand that he cared beyond reason. Before he could speak further, the Empress appeared in the doorway. Her presence filled the arena, calm yet formidable. "You acted with instinct, but also with your heart," she said, her gaze fixed on Cale. "That is the essence of humanity, Cale Thorne, courage, compassion, and the willingness to risk everything for those you love." Cale's chest tightened at her words. She had seen him completely, had tested him, and yet instead of punishment, there was recognition. The Empress' approval was a strange, heavy weight, one that both honored and bound him. Lyra moved closer, linking her hand briefly with his. Cale felt the warmth of her touch and the unspoken understanding between them. For the first time, he realized that love could be both a strength and a responsibility, a force that could elevate him even under alien scrutiny. The Empress watched silently as they stood together. Cale understood that the trials were far from over, but a bond had been forged, not just with Lyra, but with the Empress herself, whose judgment would shape every step of their journey. And in that moment, he knew that whatever trials lay ahead, he would face them, not for glory or duty alone, but for love. The following days brought a tension that weighed heavily on Cale. Every encounter, every corridor, seemed like a stage where the Empress observed not only his skills, but the depth of his emotions. Even routine meetings with alien diplomats felt charged, as if the invisible thread connecting him to Lyra made his choices resonate farther than anyone could perceive. Cale understood that he could no longer think of love as private. It had become a force, subtle but undeniable, shaping alliances, decisions, and trust. One evening, he was summoned to the observation balcony, overlooking the capital city of the Empress world. The sky shimmered with 3 suns, casting golden and violet light across the domed towers. Lyra appeared beside him, quiet and thoughtful. Her presence calmed him in a way nothing else could, yet also reminded him of the fragility of his position. "Cale," she said softly, her voice almost blending with the hum of the city below. "Do you ever feel like they watch your heart more than your actions?" Cale smiled faintly, though his eyes were serious. "Every moment, the Empress sees more than anyone else could. Even the smallest flicker of emotion doesn't escape her." Lyra's gaze lingered on him, and for a moment the distance between human and alien, ruler and guest, seemed irrelevant. "I don't care," she said, her tone steady, almost defiant. "Not about what she thinks. She stopped, biting her lip as if reconsidering the words. Cale reached out gently, hesitating only a second before letting his fingers brush hers. "I care," he whispered, "more than I should, more than is safe." Her hand lingered in his, and in that touch he felt both courage and despair. The Empress' presence was everywhere, a constant reminder that their bond existed under scrutiny, and yet the pull between them was undeniable. Suddenly the calm was broken by a warning signal. A fleet of unknown ships entered the city's atmosphere, their weapons glowing ominously. The Empress' voice filled Cale's mind. "Cale Thorne, this is your test. Protect what matters most." Without hesitation, Cale guided Lyra to a secure observation chamber. His mind worked rapidly, coordinating the city's defenses, calculating trajectories, and analyzing alien tactics. Every command he gave was precise, yet every thought was shadowed by fear for Lyra's safety. He realized that no training could prepare him for the weight of responsibility when love was at stake. Lyra watched him, awe and worry in her eyes. "Cale, I can't just stand here," she said. "You can't help me if you're not safe," he replied firmly. "I need you alive, I need you whole. That is the mission now." The alien ships advanced, but the city's defenses responded with remarkable precision. Cale's calculations and quick decisions minimized destruction, and slowly the attackers were repelled. Yet even as the battle ended, Cale felt the lingering tension, the awareness that every choice had been scrutinized by the Empress and every heartbeat measured. When the city was safe, Lyra turned to him, her expression a mixture of relief and admiration. "You did it," she said softly. "You protected everyone, including me." Cale exhaled, the weight of the day pressing down on him. "I would protect you even if the world burned around us," he said quietly. Above them, the Empress' gaze lingered, unseen but deeply felt. Cale realized that her trials were not punishments, they were lessons. Every challenge, every danger tested the strength of his character and the sincerity of his feelings. And in that moment, Cale understood something fundamental. Humanity's greatest power was not just ingenuity or bravery, but the capacity to love fiercely, even under the watchful eyes of a godlike alien Empress. Cale barely slept that night. Every corner of the palace seemed to hum with the memory of the attack, and every shadow reminded him of the Empress' silent watch. He knew that the trials were far from over. She had shown him glimpses of her expectations, but the true test, the one that measured not skill but heart, was still ahead. The next morning he was summoned to the Empress' private chambers. The doors opened silently, and there she stood, framed in the golden light of the rising suns. Cale's chest tightened. Unlike before, there was no formal ceremony, no pretense of diplomacy. The Empress' gaze bore into him, calm but piercing, as if she could see the very thoughts behind his eyes. "You have acted with courage," she said, her voice both soft and commanding. "You have protected your people, and you have protected my daughter. But there is a deeper question, Cale Thorne, one that you cannot avoid." Cale swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had anticipated tests of skill, strategy, even loyalty, but this was different. This was a confrontation of the heart. "You care for her," she said, her eyes unblinking. "I can feel it. Every choice, every hesitation, every calculated risk. Your love has guided your actions, but love is not without consequence. It can strengthen, but it can also destroy. Tell me, would you risk everything for her, even against my will?" The words struck Cale like a thunderbolt. He thought of Lyra's smile, her gentle defiance, the way her eyes lit up at the smallest joys. He thought of the danger he had faced the day before, of the knowledge that his every action was observed and judged. Yet in that instant, all fear and calculation fell away. "Yes," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "I would risk everything for her, not recklessly, but with every ounce of thought and care I have. I would face any challenge, any consequence to protect her and ensure her happiness." The Empress regarded him silently, her expression inscrutable. Cale felt exposed, as if she could see every hidden corner of his soul. Then, slowly, she stepped closer, her presence overwhelming yet oddly comforting. "Humans are fragile," she said quietly. "Yet you embody a strength they often forget, the power to choose love even when it is dangerous, even when it defies reason." Her gaze softened slightly, a rare vulnerability breaking through the stoic exterior. "Perhaps this is why I observe your kind with such interest. You are not the strongest, nor the fastest, nor the most powerful, but you are capable of something my people rarely understand, loyalty guided by the heart." Cale felt a shiver run through him. For the first time, he realized that the Empress' trials were not designed to crush him, but to reveal the truth of his humanity. She had known all along about his feelings, and yet she had allowed him to prove that love could coexist with duty, courage, and honor. Lyra appeared then, quiet but radiant, her presence a balm to his tension. She did not speak, but her eyes conveyed trust and understanding. Cale reached for her hand, and she allowed it, the warmth of her touch anchoring him in a way nothing else could. The Empress watched them, her expression serene. "You have faced fear, danger, and scrutiny," she said. "And yet you have remained true. Remember this, Cale Thorne, love is a weapon, a shield, and a guide. Treat it wisely, and it will carry you further than any fleet or strategy ever could." Cale nodded, feeling both relief and awe. The weight of judgment had been lifted, replaced by recognition, not just of his abilities, but of the essence of what it meant to be human. And in that moment, he understood that the greatest strength he possessed was not in his knowledge, skill, or courage, but in the capacity to love fiercely, even under the watchful gaze of an empress. Days later, Cale stood on the palace balcony, watching the twin moons rise over the alien city. The air was cool, filled with the scent of floating blossoms, and the soft hum of energy from the palace walls seemed to echo the rhythm of his own heart. He felt the weight of everything he had endured, the trials, the battles, the scrutiny of the Empress, and yet, for the first time, he felt a strange calm. He was no longer just a visitor or a diplomat. He was a man who had faced the test of love and lived to understand its power. Lyra joined him silently, her hand brushing against his. Cale turned, their eyes meeting, and in that gaze, 1,000 unspoken words passed between them. She had watched him endure danger, scrutiny, and fear, yet she remained steadfast beside him. Her presence reminded him why he had survived, why he had fought, why he had risked everything. She was not only the object of his affection, but a partner in courage, a beacon that gave meaning to every choice he had made. "Cale," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and certainty, "you've proven yourself in ways I never imagined, not just to my mother, but to me." He smiled, though his heart still beat wildly. "I only did what I had to do, what I had to do to protect you, to protect everyone." Lyra's eyes glistened. "You risked yourself for others, not for glory, not for recognition, but because you cared. That is why I trust you." Cale felt a lump in his throat. All the fear, all the hesitation, all the weight of the Empress' judgment melted away in her words. He realized then that love was more than an emotion. It was a force, as mighty as fleets of ships, as enduring as the stars themselves. And in his heart, he knew that he would never stop defending it, never stop fighting for it, no matter the odds. The Empress appeared behind them, silent as always, yet her presence carried a quiet approval. "Cale Thorne," she said, her voice soft but resonant, "you have chosen wisely. You have demonstrated that humanity's greatest power is not merely strength, nor strategy, nor survival, but the courage to love even under the heaviest scrutiny. Your loyalty, your bravery, and your heart have been tested. You have not failed." Cale bowed slightly, gratitude and respect filling him. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. The Empress inclined her head, then stepped back, letting them stand together. Cale felt the weight of her words sink in. He had passed the ultimate test, not by proving his skill, but by proving the enduring strength of his humanity. Lyra rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "We've faced so much," she whispered, "but I believe we can face whatever comes next together." Cale's heart swelled. "Together," he echoed, feeling the word anchor him in a way nothing else could. He realized that no matter how vast the galaxy, no matter how alien or powerful the beings around him, humanity's greatest gift was not conquest or invention. It was the courage to care, to love, and to risk everything for what mattered most. As the twin moons cast their silver glow over the city, Cale and Lyra stood side by side, their hands intertwined. For the first time, the galaxy did not feel alien or hostile. It felt alive, full of possibility, and full of a strength that was uniquely human. And in that moment, Cale understood that he had been tested not to survive, but to embrace what made him human, the ability to love, fiercely and without regret, even before an alien empress whose eyes had seen everything. The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if acknowledging the triumph of heart over fear, courage over doubt, and love over all obstacles. Kale smiled, knowing that whatever challenges awaited, he would face them, not as a mere human in an alien world, but as a man whose heart had proven stronger than any test the universe could offer.